tight, narrow, like concave looking area. So for us, if we had an engine failure, there was nowhere for us to put this down. We were pretty much gonna die. Whew. All right, so I decided that I'm finally just gonna go ahead and tell you guys about the worst flight that I've ever had in my life. It's been requested by a couple people, so here it is. And I don't even think that my lady at home, I've never told her this story at all, just because it was horrifying, right? So I almost died like, I don't know, like 12, 13 times in the span of, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is. So if she's watching this, I'm sorry I didn't tell you at the time. I just knew it would make her worried. But for those of you that don't know, I'm a commercial helicopter pilot and been flying for about 3 or 4, actually about 3 years at this time. So our job was to take an aircraft that we were getting out of overhaul. And if you're unfamiliar with that, every 2,200 hours in Robinson, so R22s, R44s, R66s, whenever they hit about 22 hours of their lifespan, they have to go through a procedure called overhauling. And all that is like you're gutting the inside of the aircraft and you're just putting in like new engines, new fuel lines, whatever it is. I don't know, I'm not a mechanic, I just fly the thing, right? But I know the basics of what it's like to do an overhaul. So we had an aircraft that was in overhaul, and my company wanted us to fly from Arkansas, so Marion, Arkansas, and we were gonna fly up to this place called Sevier County. Sevier County Choppers is like, it's, I guess, like a hub for Robinson to do overhauls in. We were gonna pick up this aircraft when we were gonna fly it to Salt Lake City, which is our like partner school. So we had a main school, and then we had this, we had like our sister school where we were at, and then this main flight school was in Salt Lake City. So we were gonna drop it off at Salt Lake City. So first thing in the morning, probably about 2 in the morning, we all packed it all up and we were flying in the Bell 206 L3. And it was like a training flight for some of the students that we had in the school, and it was gonna be used to drop us off, right? So we were gonna fly in, get dropped off, pick up this aircraft out of overhaul and fly it from Sevier County, Tennessee to Salt Lake City. That's the game plan. Well, first thing in the morning, 2 o'clock, and it is super foggy. It was so foggy to the point that we thought we would actually have to cancel the flight. So we end up getting all of our gear set in, and we met weight and balance, and which is like, you have certain requirements for like how much weight you can have, and we were just within those limits. So it was already sketchy. Like this, the whole day was just sketchy as hell. And it started from this initial flight, and it just got progressively worse. It's like a day that I'll never forget, essentially. But we all packed it up, we flew out to Sevier County, and on the route, we had to stay below about 500 feet because of how foggy it was. And I was absolutely exhausted because I was up all night and I knew it would be a long flight in the morning. So I was a little bit nervous. So I had like my nerves going at the same time. And I remember I was in the back of the aircraft and I was like falling asleep, and I'd look out the window and it's like I could barely see grass and the tops of trees. The scary thing is, for a lot of people who don't realize this, the #1 biggest danger for helicopters, this is what kills helicopter pilots, is power lines. Power lines kill helicopter pilots like you wouldn't believe. So you know those little like orange balls you see on like telephone wires that are sometimes across like lakes, highways and stuff like that? They put those little balls on there so that we don't fly into them, to let us know that there's these, you know, power lines, because they're almost invisible for the helicopter pilot. So the craziest thing for us is like, as we're flying over this this like mountainous terrain in almost zero visibility, I ended up seeing, like, I wake up, I look out the window and I can see those orange balls like passing below us. So now we have no visibility. I don't think that we should have been flying that day. It sketched the hell out of me. We could barely see anything, and the things that I did see was like imminent death, just 50 to 100 feet below us. So we're like skimming these lines, these power lines, almost coming to like a dead stop where we're hovering in place because we couldn't see in front of us. So we didn't know if there was a hill in front of us, a mountain in front of us, a building in front of us. You just couldn't see it. So we spent the whole morning kind of skirting all these low-level clouds with horrible visibility, and it was at least calm wind conditions. Now, I was trying to get a little bit of sleep, so I would pass back out, get kind of rattled, wake up, look out the window and see that the conditions are about the same. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I look around and it was funny as my buddy Dally was getting pissed. And he was my co-pilot for today, so he was getting angry because he's like, we shouldn't be flying in this. Like, this is so dangerous. Like, he was getting like angry. And it was just unsettling that we even made that trip. So this day just started off horribly. Well, we end up landing, and I don't remember exactly where we landed at, but we decided to get like some food, so we stopped at a Dairy Queen. And you ever have like those days where you're like eating something and you could just tell it's about to mess you up? Like, it's just one of those things that's going to be sitting on your stomach that's going to destroy you. And it was pretty much like that for us. So we all ate our food, and within minutes I look around, everybody was kind of feeling a little bit sick. So I think it was one of those like little add-ons and like a little bit of extra anxiety or pressure that you don't really want to deal with, because now my stomach hurts and we have a long flight in front of us. And it's kind of sketchy because when an aircraft comes out of overhaul within the first 50 hours, it's the most dangerous because you don't know what's going to happen to this aircraft, right? So you don't know if it's going to have mechanical issues, failures, anything like that. Usually most incidences occur outside or within those 50 hours. So we were already kind of sketched out, and I didn't have a lot of experience at this time as a pilot. I mean, I had a couple years, and I was still, I want to say I probably had about 500 hours at the time, 400, 500 hours. So I was still relatively new, and Robinsons are notorious for being like dangerous aircraft. Just the way it is. If you look inside of the manuals, there's something that's called the FAR AIM, which is like the pilot's handbook. It's the only aircraft in the world that has its own specific designated page, and it's called the FAR 73. It's the only one, and it's like that for a reason. Those things are incredibly dangerous. And they always say if you could fly the 22, like the Robinsons, the 22 or the 44, you could fly any aircraft in the world because they are horrifying. All right. But long story short, we finally landed at Sevier County, and they were finishing up the overhaul. And I think they did like an overhaul, they did a repaint, and they did some other things in the bird. So it was probably about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning about this time. And the guys that dropped us off left. We waited around until they came out with the overhauled aircraft. And I also caught a little bit of sleep in the time, a little nap. But it was getting hot, man. It was like, once the fog and everything cleared out in the morning, it was super hot. And that's really important for pilots, especially like helicopter guys in 22s and in 44s, because when you have a high heat, you can't really function as well. The aircraft doesn't fly very good in hot temperatures, right? So there's a thing that we always say, like high, hot, and heavy are the hardest or the worst conditions for flight, right? And the reason this is that air density, or the density of the air, starts thinning out, and it makes everything a lot more difficult, right? And those flight conditions in the morning were starting to creep in very quickly. So we started getting that high, hot, humid temperatures in Tennessee, and it was, I don't remember the exact date. I know it was like in summertime, so it was probably about July or August. Well, aircraft comes out, and then this is where the real fun begins. We get into it, and we do all of our pre-flights, we do all of our warm-up and all of our startup procedures. Everything looks beautiful. There's not a single issue inside of this bird yet. So after we turn it up a little bit, our clutch light comes on, which is pretty normal when you're starting an aircraft. Came on and it went off. And inside of helicopters, whenever you start them up, you engage, or you let it spin for a bit, and then you engage the clutch system. And the clutch system, outside of the engine, it kind of, or the engine kind of juts out a little bit, and the rotor, the main rotor shaft, comes down and it connects, and it has like a belt, essentially. It's like a little belt system. And you can hear it when you engage the clutch. You can hear it make that like it's actually tensioning, and it applies tension to this belt that lets you spin the rotors. So sometimes during normal operating procedures, that light will cut on just because that belt is warming up, right? So temperature changes, the belt's spinning, it might not be completely taut, but eventually it goes out. And our manuals tell us that we have about 7 seconds before we have to enter auto rotation, or essentially we're, you know, doing an emergency procedure. So it's very important that clutch light, when you hear that clutch come on, and we would count it down. We're like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, light goes out. And that's very important for this story. So that's kind of how the clutch system works. Now, once we got up and we started departing down the runway, everything was fine. The aircraft was a little bit sticky. And by sticky, I mean the controls just feel a little bit weird. They're a little bit tighter than normal. And I want to say that's pretty common, because whenever you go into a new aircraft, it's like borrowing your friend's car or driving somebody else's car, right? When you first go into their car, it just feels weird. It feels different because it's not yours. So we kind of have this happen occasionally. Now, we start flying and everything was clear blue skies, beautiful weather, everything was good. We were kind of laughing, making jokes along the way. And like I mentioned earlier, we still had some of that, you know, low-lying fog that burnt off because of the sun. The sun came out, burnt out all the clouds. But we start flying towards this place that is the Ozark Mountains. And they're not necessarily mountains, I would say, at least from like our perspective. They're like these long range of rolling hills. And I can close my eyes and picture this day so vividly. And as we're rolling out, we are probably about 1,200 feet, maybe a little bit lower, so probably about 800 feet. And 60, 70 miles out, we were getting ready to approach the Ozark Mountains. And I remember we had listened to the weather, and there was no weather station anywhere remotely close. The nearest one was about 40 miles out, so we listened to it, and it says that winds are gusting about 40 knots. For us, this is horrifying, right? Our aircraft is rated for 28 knot winds, and I think it can go up to, I need to do the numbers on it again. I think it's like 35 mile an hour or 35 knot gusts. So we're pretty much over the maximum that we're allowed to fly in. And it's very prevalent. You can really feel that when you're flying in wind conditions that are even approaching those boundaries. So any wind gusts that are 30 knots plus is like blowing around a leaf in a hurricane. You just feel like you have no control, and it's horrifying. So we're flying towards these Ozark Mountains, and like I said, 1,200 feet. And I remember I look over, and my buddy Dally is like, he's like, well, this is gonna suck. And I didn't really think of it at the time. I didn't picture it being like a bad experience. I figured it'd be a little bit rocky going over some of the hills, bumps, mountains, whatever, but nothing could have prepared us for how bad it was actually gonna be. So we started approaching these mountains, and as we get within, you know, less than a mile of them, we can start getting a lot of turbulence just coming from the mountains. So you have like mountain turbulence and upslope and all these different, you know, mechanical turbulence is what it's called if it's off an obstruction. So we're starting to get like some mechanical turbulence from some of the trees and in different, you know, mountains, the way they were set up. Now we approach the very first hill, and if I could paint the picture, man, I could close my eyes and see it. It's hills for as long as you can see. So it would just go like this, rolling green hill, all the way off into the distance till you can't see any further. And there was this low level of like, almost like a haze, like clouds, just kind of hazing over this. And we had the vents open because it's summer, so we had this nice cool breeze coming in. And for some reason, it just felt like something was off. Like it felt really unsettling. And we approached that first hill, and we could barely clear this mountain peak. And as we cleared it, we were lifted up, like I want to say probably about 50 to 100 feet. So we were lifted up about 50 or 100 feet. And right as we crossed over that hill, our tail rotor kicked out behind us, and we just dropped like a rock. And in doing so, it had sent me and Dally both into the windows. So we both like smash our head off the window because of how violent it was. So we hit that peak, it sends us up. We kind of turn that tail sideways, lose that altitude. We get smashed into the window. We're trying to make sure that we're controlling the aircraft, and our clutch light comes on. So as we kind of regain our bearing and I turn the aircraft to reposition that nose, we see the clutch light come on. And we usually do our count, and like I said, it probably takes, I don't know, 2-3 seconds, and then it goes out. Well, this time it was like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4, and it went to about 6. And right when it was about to hit 7 and we were gonna have to enter an auto rotation, it ended up cutting out. So we got luck. We pretty much lucked out at that. And an auto rotation is almost like a pinwheel, right? So when you have an engine that's driving your rotor system, you can go up, down, left, right, it doesn't matter. When you enter an auto rotation or when you lose an engine, what you're doing is you're changing the way the aircraft flies from this forward flight or this induced flow. So wind is coming over the rotor and it's mechanically driven, keeping it, a lift. Well, when you don't have that engine, the aircraft starts to fall out of the sky. And the reason it's like a pinwheel is once the aircraft is falling, you're positioning the aircraft to get as much wind underneath it so that you're falling, and that's what's spinning your rotor system. And this is what we use for like an emergency procedure. If you lose your rotors or you lose your engine while you're flying, not if you lose your rotors, you're dead, right? But if you lose your engine while you're flying, you don't fall like a rock out of the sky. You actually kind of go forward and down. And we position the aircraft and we pretty much manipulate the rotors so that we can land safely without an engine. Now, without an engine, you're pretty much forced to go wherever you have available. So for us, right when I saw that light cut on, we're constantly looking for places to land if we have an engine failure. It can happen at any time. Now, with that clutch light coming on so close to that 7-second mark, for us, it was like, we had to constantly be vigilant of where we were gonna put this down if we had to. And I looked down, and about 2,000 feet below me, down this hill, all the way at the very bottom, actually it wasn't 2,000 feet, I'm exaggerating. It was probably, 800 to 1,000 feet. The tiny road, we had this small little winding road and a couple houses staggered here and there. And there was like telephone wires everywhere, like just indiscriminately placed. There's wires all over the place. And it was a very, very, very tight, narrow, like concave looking area. So for us, if we had an engine failure, there was nowhere for us to put this down. We were pretty much gonna die. And I think that was kind of like the first wake up call for us, was that if something does happen and we have an engine failure, there's no safe place to land. And for a pilot or anybody, especially like helicopters, man, that's a very uneasy feeling. And I think that kind of added to some of the anxiety and the stress that we had, and this workload ahead of us was just getting more intense. So clutch light comes back on, we restabilize the aircraft, and now I have to get my altitude back. So I start climbing up again, and sure, within, another couple hundred feet, the next hill. So we go to hit the next hill, same exact thing happens, but this time it was even more violent and vicious than the first one. The wind kicked us out to the left hard as possible. Same exact thing, but this time we knew it was coming, so I tensed up a little bit and braced, so my shoulder hit the window. But in doing so, my shoulder hit the window and it smashed my earpiece into like the side of my face, and it kind of like messed up my glasses. So my sunglasses were like half off my face. My earpiece came off, so the loud like rumble of that chopper, just doom 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 doom, was just smashing into my eardrum. I look over, Dali's hands are like white because he's gripping the controls so hard. We ended up correcting it, fixed it again, and we were just preparing for the next hill. And I look up, and it is just a sea of hills. It's almost like you just know it's not going to end, and that's how it felt. And I think that was another thing that really kind of made us regret this whole decision, this whole day, because you know how like if something happens to you and you know it's going to be bad, but you don't know how bad it is, and then it happens, it's like it just makes it even it makes it even more of a reality, right? And that's how it was for us. We knew that going to those mountains, it would be bad. We knew it would be kind of rough. We just didn't know it would be that bad. So when I saw the first mountain, I'm like, whatever, it is what it is. But after we felt the pain of it and how violent it was, it made the whole rest of the flight like horrifying. So we continued this process, hitting hill after hill after hill, and it was so bad that there was like blood in the cockpit from like smashing our face into the side of the window. My hands were so white from just like gripping onto the controls that we had to keep swapping back and forth between me and Dally. So as we're going to the next hill, it was the same thing. I'm like, okay, I got it this time. And he would have a break because we just didn't have enough energy between us for one person to keep doing this flight. Now, we start passing after these hills, after these hills, after these hills, probably about 6 or 7. And it was getting so bad that we could barely control the aircraft at this point. So what we decided to do was, instead of fight these hills and fly straight over them, we were going to try to like go sideways, right? So what was happening for aerodynamics and for weather related stuff is the sun's position heats up one side of hills, right? So if the sun is up and it's heating up one side of the hills and it's casting, or the other side isn't getting that heat, it doesn't have any convection, it creates this very, very uneven atmosphere for us to fly in. So to give you an example of how this affects us in flight, when we're flying over parking lots, right, or Walmart is a good example. If you're in a helicopter and you're flying over Walmart, that black tar, that whatever they use on top of the roof, actually creates so much heat and so much convection that when you're flying over it, you'll pop up 200 or 300 feet, right? Because that rising heat. So that's what's happening on these mountains. One side is very cool and one side is very hot. So the side that's very hot is creating a ton of lift, and the other side has like none. So when we're approaching this hill, we're getting sent up 200-300 feet. We cross over and then we just dump 200-300 feet. And it is like being on a roller coaster. But on top of that, that tail rotor is also kicking out, because the tail rotor also has efficiencies, right? I'm not going to get into the efficiency of the tail rotor, but the tail rotor is an anti-torque thing for us. So if our rotor system is spinning, clockwise, you want something that counteracts it, or else you'd just be spinning nonstop. Well, with all this like flipping, this increase of altitude and then losing altitude and getting like spun out, it was sending me and him like flying, and it knocked everything. The reason that they tell you to secure everything in the cockpit before a flight is this. It was sending everything kind of flying. So we had bags and stuff in the back, and the bags were getting shifted. So on top of this, our weight's getting shifted, and we did everything we could to secure the bags, but we just didn't expect it to be this violent. So the turbulence that we ran into was so much more severe than we had anticipated, that we didn't expect it to actually throw our gear off of our hooks around the back of the bird. And on top of it, what people don't realize is, in helicopters, there's 2 tanks, right? So you have a main fuel tank and you have an aux tank. And what happens is they both share fuel, right? And there's a float type gauge in it. And I'm not gonna get into the details, I don't wanna bore you with this. But what happens is as you burn off fuel, your weight also changes. So the aerodynamics and the characteristics of that aircraft change as you fly. So for us, we're kind of burning fuel, that's changing the aerodynamics a little bit. Not a ton, it's not as much as you think, but it does play a small role in this. And then our gear is getting thrown all throughout the back. So now our weight is shifting around, and every time that me and him get thrown into the side of the door, it was actually popping the door open, like it actually kind of wrecked the little latching system. So inside of 22s or 44s, they have this little metal latch, and for this $400,000 aircraft, you wouldn't think it would be this simple, but it's literally just like a piece of metal that you pull down and then you push over to latch it. It's not very secure, and it's like, it's thicker than a paper clip, but not by much. So you can like take your shoulder and pop that door open if you want. So every time we were slamming into the door would come up, so it would pop open, and it would just make this like horrifying like sounding whistle. It just sounded obnoxious. So everything inside of this cockpit was just becoming more and more aggravating, frustrating, and irritating as time went on. So we were trying to find our way through these mountains, like I said, without flying over them. We were gonna fly like parallel to them, because we figured that maybe if we fly parallel enough, we can kind of negate the way that this wind is affecting us and this temperature differences. So we can kind of ride it up and then fall on the other side without it being super violent. And that helps for a little bit, but now it's taking so much longer to get to our destination because we have to get to Salt Lake City, and we are still in Arkansas. So we're finally making our way towards, I guess, like the ending. Like we weren't too far from our destination at this point. So we're kind of weaving our way in and out of these mountains and these like little hills and just kind of following them. And we finally round out and break free from the mountains. So as we're coming closer to Oklahoma at this point, I forgot the name of this airport. It's a little tiny, airport out there. Well, me and Dally, we finally break free from the Ozarks, and we had a while, and it was just clean sailing from there. We didn't really have a lot of turbulence. We didn't have any crazy wind conditions, so we're flying straight towards our destination. But because we had gone side to side so much, we actually burned off so much fuel that we had to take a pit stop at Oklahoma. So when we were coming into this little tiny like airport, it wasn't super tiny. It wasn't like a rinky-dink airport, but it was a tiny little airport. And we finally come in, we land, and the guy that came out to refuel us comes over, and he looks in, and there's like blood on the windows. Everything inside of this aircraft is just like thrown all over. Our book bags are like ripped open. There's stuff all over it. Me and Dally look like ghosts. Like it looks like we're zombies at this point. My hands hurt so bad from over gripping these controls. My feet hurt from being on the pedals the entire time, because in helicopters, whenever you make an input, you have to use your pedals to counter it, right? So if you're pulling in power and you're adding torque, you need to hit the opposite pedal to stop the torque, right? There's a lot going on. So imagine being inside of like a manual, and you know how like you have to constantly hit the clutch, and when you're on a hill, you're just kind of feathering the clutch back and forth so you're not rolling backwards. That's what it's like. And it's almost like my, I had an old Mustang, and the clutch was super stiff. So after those really long car rides when I'm driving through like DC and stuff, where I'm always on that clutch, my foot would be like just in so much pain. And that's kind of what it reminded me of. So my feet hurt, my legs hurt, my hands hurt. Like I said, there's blood all over our stuff. We had to, fix everything inside of the aircraft. And the best part is the fueling guy comes over, and he comes over to help us out, and Dally has the door like half open. And the guy's like, all right, man, like the dude was super nice, came over to help us out. And Dally's like, will you get the fuck out of here? And he like was so upset. And I look over, I'm like, dude, you're kind of an asshole for that, man. But the guy eventually came over and was refueling it. We managed to clean everything off. And Dally steps out, and as I'm shutting down, or as we get everything all shut down, I'm still sitting inside of the aircraft, just kind of collecting my composure, because this flight, even though, I'm talking about it now in like 20 minutes, this flight was probably about, probably about 3.5, 4 hours. Maybe, I'm exaggerating, probably about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. And it was pushing our limits with fuel. I know that for a fact. So it was definitely up there with the 2 hour mark. And what cracks me up is Dally comes in, he opens up the cockpit door, and he looks at me, and he's like, bro, you won't believe this shit. He's like, they don't need this aircraft at Salt Lake City anymore. He's like, we gotta turn around and fly back tonight. So I look at him, and dude, I was so, I don't know, it was one of those things where it's like, you know what, fuck it, let's just do it. Like, I wasn't even upset. I'm like, let's just go ahead and get this done. And the best part about it was like, we had so much going on at the time, and I actually had my Rhodesian Ridgeback, and if you're not familiar with those dogs, they have this line of hair that goes down their back, and it runs opposite direction of the rest of their hair, so it looks like a little mohawk, right? So I left my Rhodesian Ridgeback with Dally, his wife, and his kids. So he calls, or he's like, dude, on top of it, he's like, my wife left me a voicemail. She's like, the kids took the dog out of the crate because they wanted to play with him, and he's barking at him and doing some really weird stuff, and the hair on his neck is sticking up, and he's like growling at everybody. Like, I've never seen that happen. Like, like, I don't know. I'm like, don't let the kids play with them. I don't know. I don't want him to attack the kids. So that was also in the back of my mind too. I'm like, oh no, my dog is going to do something. He's going to attack the kids, and they're going to have to put my dog down. And I feel bad for Dally and his kids because they were so gracious to let us like keep this dog, you know, while I was flying. So it kind of made us laugh because it shed a little bit of like humor on this horrible situation. Because as we were like flying towards the Ozarks again, I'm like, oh shit, I'm like, Dally, dude, it's a Rhodesian Ridgeback, bro. It's not the hair on the back of his neck that's sticking up. That's just his breed. It's like the little mohawk. That's what she's talking about. But because I had this dog for so long, I almost forgot, you know, that he has that, you know, hair down his back. So that kind of cracked me up, and it kind of made things a little bit, you know, lighter, lighten up the mood. But we're flying back, and I'm looking out again at that same thing. The Ozark Mountains are approaching, and it's just rolling hill after hill after hill for miles on end. And I look over at Dally, I'm like, dude, like, this sucks, man. I don't want to do this, like, at all. And the greatest part about the whole thing was on the way back, it was probably the smoothest flight I think we've ever had. Every single hill that we hit, nothing. Because by this point, the sun had kind of set a little bit. Everything, like, land cools off faster than water. So because it's land, thank goodness, everything had kind of balanced down a little bit. So we didn't have tons of convection. It was just a smooth, nice, steady flight. And the winds went from 40 knot gusts down to, I think it wasn't even calling gusts anymore. Because I think if it's below 10 knots, they don't consider it a gust. I don't know. I can't remember my weather stuff. It's been years. But no gusts. Calm wind conditions, and it was like this very serene thing as me and Dally just kind of not sailed obviously in the sunset, but we just kind of flew off into the sunset and returned the bird and set it all back down at, you know, Marion, Arkansas, like it was nothing. But I'll never forget to this day that experience that we had of this almost like bone jarring flight through some of the most severe turbulence I've ever experienced in my life. And for us, I'm shocked that that aircraft was even able or capable of doing it, because it says that we're not supposed to fly in anything above, you know, like those 30 knot gusts. So for us, it was like a blessing. Said the Lord kind of, you know, saved us on that day and was watching out for us. But like I said, this video too is also for my lady. She's never heard the story. The things I would usually tell her at flight school, or actually not even at flight school, it started in flight school, but whenever I would go out in a flight, I don't care what happened. I don't care if like the rotors blew off and we just barely survived. She's like, oh, how was the flight? I'm like, oh, it was awesome. It was like the greatest flight of my life. I don't know, it was great, you know? So I got back home. I think I actually went to sleep after this. But when I woke up, I remember she had texted. She's like, oh, how was the flight? Did you guys make it? I'm like, yeah, it wasn't that bad, actually. It was a little bit bumpy. But little did she know that we spent like 4 hours or wherever that time. I don't know. I'm going to say it's 4 hours. It felt like 10. It was probably about 2 or 3 hours straight of us having near-death experiences over and over and over. And it's like one of those things where, you know, if you get into like an accident or you get punched in the face or whatever it is that hurts the hell out of you, then you know that it's going to happen to you again and again and again and again. It just got worse and worse and worse. But, you know, so if she does watch this, hopefully she doesn't watch this the whole thing. Sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I just didn't want her to worry because I had a lot more flights ahead of us. But that was definitely one of the more severe flights I think that we had, and like I said, it could have been a lot worse than what it was. But for us, that really pushed my limits, especially being a low-level pilot. I think going back, and this is just a moral of the story, if there's any pilots that are watching this video, is those decisions, they always say that, like, for pilots, you are pilot in command and you have the ultimate say-so over safety. So I think if I can go back in time, knowing the flight conditions that we had, knowing at least that it would kind of push those limits. I think when we first heard that, you know, 30 to 40 mile an hour, you know, wind gust call, a smart move would be to just cancel the flight and turn around. They say that the FAA has a saying where they say break the chain, and it's kind of corny, but it's true. they say that every accident in aviation follows a chain of events. And you can apply this to your regular life too. And if you break a link in the chain, the accident doesn't occur. So they've used this for many different analogies and stuff like, oh, if you wouldn't have gotten in the car and driven to work that day, you wouldn't have had an accident. You know, it's simple stuff, but I really think that we were pushing our luck with it, and we could have broke that chain and you know, stop all of this from occurring had we decided to just turn around once we realized that it just wasn't worth it. So, and we did it twice, back to back. So it's a little bit of the get there-itis. Our company told us we had to do it, and we did it. So for us, it was a lesson going forward in decision making, and hopefully it's a story too that can help other people out there. And just remember, it's not worth it sometimes to push those limits. We just got lucky. We count our blessings, but that's pretty much it, man. So sorry to my lady for not telling you sooner. And like I said, hopefully it helps anybody else out there. And hopefully I got some other crazy stories, man, going forward. I got some wild ones. I'm still kind of getting used to it. So hopefully the story at least wasn't super boring or bland, but we'll get better with time. But I appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. Ah!